Welcome to the Wellness Revolution podcast.
Welcome again to the Wellness Revolution. Thanks for tuning in again. I have with me a young lady. See, we get to a certain age and we all like to be called young. A young lady who specializes in helping high-performing CEOs. Now, you guys hear in the background my dog, Apollo. People see my show always like so. I'm going to bring Apollo up here for a minute. Because, come here, Apollo. Okay, so we're going to stop for a second. Because the audience likes to see Apollo sometimes. So we're going to bring Apollo in the picture for a moment. But let's go back. High-performing executives. And you're saying, well, what does that have to do with me? A high-performing executives. Well, Andro Donovan actually worked with really tough youth in London and helped them and parlayed her way into working with transforming executives. Now, how do you get what she has? Well, she has a book, and we're going to talk about that book and talk about how you can get it. But if you can learn from a woman who went from tough youth in London to high-performing CEOs in big companies, you can really learn something here and transform your life. So Andro Donovan, welcome to the Wellness Revolution.
Hi, Veronica. Lovely to be here.
So tell me a little bit about how you got started. I want to hear a little bit about those working with tough youth.
Well, I did start out life as an English literature teacher working in the toughest parts of London. And it was a real challenge getting these kids who'd had years of teachers saying to them, you know, I know your type, you know, shut up, sit down, and I've also seen your brother, and kind of didn't believe in them. So these kids would operate in the way they were expected, which is basically pretty delinquent. And being idealistic, I suppose when I first joined the profession, I thought this just isn't right, you know. So I made a decision that I would start very differently. And I realized that these kids were being told, you're not worthy, you're not good enough, you'll never be good enough. And they kind of played that out in reality. So I gave them a different reality. I started to talk to them in a very respectful way. That was one of the things I did. And getting them to begin to connect with some of their dreams and start to visualize themselves with the sort of life they really wanted, the kind of achievements they wanted to gain in life. And, you know, without going into too much detail, they started to resonate with those thoughts, and we created a great rapport. And as a result, all the kids that I worked with when I left that profession got their GCSE English, as we used to call it in those days. And I was very, very proud of that. So that's where I learned a lot of my lessons that I use now, you know, in life with CEOs, because it doesn't matter where you are, you know, whether you're a student or you're a mum or you're a big chief executive of a big company, you still have insecurities. You still lose loved ones. You still get ill. And we're all human beings under the titles.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you talked about you were getting kids to be able to tap into themselves, and this is troubled kids. And I have found that one of the crucial points in tapping into myself is having one, time to do it, and two, not all the distractions around. So I don't have on TV, I don't have on radio, I'm not always plugged in. And you talk about silence and why people are so scared of silence. I have met people that they walk in the house, they have to turn on the TV, even though they're not watching anything. What's going on with people where they're afraid of silence?
Well, I love the way you put that, Veronica. I think people are scared of silence because when you're being silent, you have to connect in with yourself. And when you connect in with yourself, you're connecting to emotions, to difficulties, to upset, which is why a lot of people, you know, eat too much, drink too much, smoke too much. They're trying to suppress those experiences and somehow, you know, avoid having them. But if you start to get used to having a bit of silent time with yourself, that's when you can tune into the whisper, that little quiet voice that comes from very, very deep within you that says, I'm not happy. or this could be better, or I could be better. You know, it's that little, very, very silent voice. I think Spielberg said it's the voice that speaks very softly to you. And if you've got too much noise going on, you'll never hear it.
So a lot of people are afraid of those voices because in today's times, a lot of those voices are saying negative things to us. You wouldn't be, and there's all that self-doubt that's been going on, and it seems like there's an overabundance now of this self-doubt and this negative talk, and so the easiest way to drown it out is to turn on the TV, to turn on the radio, to be connected to all your electronic devices. So what do you tell people to be able to begin to disconnect? Because it's not going to be just like, I have a friend, she's about to go on a silent retreat. I'm like, oh no, too much for me. And I spend most of my days not listening to radio or TV or all that stuff. But I was like, oh no, too much for me, silent retreat. What do you tell people to begin to be able to tap into the silence without being too afraid?
Well, what you began to talk about, that self-doubt, that yama that's going on in our heads all the time, is a sort of little inner critic that is continually undermining our best made plans and often arguing for your limitations, you know? So let's say you want to go on a diet, that little voice goes in, yeah, right, you know, before you've even started. And so one of the reasons silence is important is for you to be able to tune in to that subliminal set of voices that's taken up permanent residence in your head. And in my book, actually, I use a metaphor called rat. And it's a really ugly little rat that's sort of gnawing away at you. So the first stage is to identify these voices and see if you can either journal or record or catch what's actually being said. Because guess what? This is not you. Rational mind, or rat as I call it, is simply a whole lifetime of where you felt you were disapproved of, or you got it wrong, or you failed, and you've laid down a little tape in there that keeps activating. And so part of being silent is to tune into that negative and reframe it, rephrase it. So I can't could become, well, I could, or maybe I could, and a maybe becomes a yes, I could. Because if you think about every time you've made a good decision, you've gone through that process, but you've probably not been aware of it. So it's about consciously beginning to rewire yourself, literally rewiring those negatives into some positive hardware in there so that you can give yourself a starting chance.
Okay, so once you get to a point where you can get a little bit of silence, you got to get rid of some of this clutter that's built up. And you talk about spring cleaning your brain. So tell us about how we can begin that spring cleaning process. Now, remember, a lot of us out there are hoarders in our brains. So how do we begin to throw away just one little piece? How do we do that?
Well, it's very interesting because I've just arrived at a point where I'm making a decision to be about 80% vegan. And the voices in my head are going crazy. You know, they're sort of saying, you can't survive without meat. How are you going to do dinner parties and, you know, think about all these lovely foods for your guests, etc. And in the end, I've said, I'm making a decision because I'm backing my health. And it's investing in one's health rather than anything else and prioritizing that. So to answer your question, getting rid of one bit of clutter, which is I can't change my diet, or I can't change my relationship, or I can't transform my relationship with my kids. Just changing the words in there, just very slightly, starts to change the evidence that you see. And I've done this for years and it always works. If you change the ideas in your head that's happening, you start to change the reality. Because you are your thoughts and you always get what you expect. So if you're expecting to fail, guess what? You will, because you want to be right about your ideas. We all want to be right. So you've got to start changing that mindset. And the first stage is to actually stop the noise. Stop the iPad, stop the TV. I mean, maybe music could help in this. You know, some people can connect with music. but generally stop that clutter, that external distraction, and journey inwards. And journeying inwards means bringing your consciousness from out there to inside, and be nice and quiet with yourself. And then you'll see what starts to surface, because you're like this deep ocean. And unless you're quiet, these things don't surface to the top.
So one thing I tell people about music is sometimes I make recommendations. I do intuitive readings and I'll tell people about music. And I'll recommend that they listen to music, but music without any words. So music only.
Yeah,
Music only. And that music cannot be music of a song that has words that you might know, because then you'll be singing the words in your head. So music that was written to be just music without any type of words that go along with the music, so that you don't clutter. So what happens is sometimes people say, okay, yeah, easy, I can stop thinking about that, but then they're singing a song in their head, and that's not necessarily the goal of this. So one thing is detoxing. We're talking about, interesting, you're talking about becoming a vegan. A lot of people have that goal, and it's easier when you detox yourself, but there's a process you go through. So you talked about one little thing. So how have you been doing this? Are you saying, okay, I usually have meat for lunch and I'm not having meat for lunch anymore, and that's your first step? Or I eat meat 7 days a week. Now I'm going to eat it 6 days a week. Are you transitioning, or are you cold turkeying it?
That's a really lovely question. I arrived at a point in the summer where I realized I'd prioritized everything else but my own physical health, if that makes sense. And a lot of that is to do with the territory. You know, it's flying, it's traveling, it's eating stuff that I get given on flights and things. So I thought, I'm going to use the summer to start to heal myself. You know, I mean, I'm not saying I was on death's door, but I prioritized myself over and above what I might be doing, you know, other things. So it started with a detox, a 3-day juicing detox. Then I did a lot of yoga with a friend of mine. And now I'm starting to make small adjustments. And I tell you, my body is going, thank you. And yesterday, this is really absolutely spot on. I went to my nutritionist lady, and she did one of those little blood tests. And she said, do you realize that you've got a really strong intolerance to dairy milk? And I said, I'm so happy about that. She said, why? I said, because it's agreeing with what I instinctively know I need to do, which is to give up dairy for a while. And she said, you only need to give it up for 12 weeks and then you can introduce it. So the point is, it's little adjustments. And if you start to make those little adjustments and your body starts to thank you, then you're cooking with calour, as we say over here. You know, you're really fighting fit, and you can start to get the evidence to go on further and further. And that's the physical evidence. But then the psychological evidence is you going, my body is responding, I'm losing weight, I'm feeling more energetic. I've cut my grocery bill down by a hell of a lot because, you know, meat is very expensive. So I think that's where to begin, with small changes, but to have some clear goals, some arrival points that you want to get to is great.
Yes. And so my advice to the audience and to you, especially for traveling, because I travel quite a bit and I know this, that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And so therefore, when you travel, you're going to have to be prepared about what you're taking with you to make sure that you don't get into trouble, and then figuring out what's going to be there on the other end. And you always have to have your plan in place, because everything's going to do everything to derail you. You know, when you start something, it seems like the whole world's working to disrail you. But once you get on that even keel, you'll know where the salad bars in the airports are. You'll have those foods that you could pack small in your suitcase. You'll know when you get someplace. You'll have called ahead to the hotel and say, I need this, that, and the other thing. So for people who are going on a health journey, it's important for them to realize that you can let stuff happen to you, or you can drive your destiny. And so if you are serious about your health, nothing will derail it. Even those airplane cookies that they give you, and No, I mean, now airlines are being nice. I fly Continental now. Continental got a bad rap because they dragged the doctor off the plane. And so now they're giving out cookies with like chocolate in the middle or something to everybody on the airplane. And I'm just like, way to help my health. So now on the other side, I say, the people give them to me and I'll take them, I'll put them in my bag and I'll throw them away. So the other part is for people when they're starting to eat well is they're like, I don't eat that. I don't do this. Learn to be kind and gracious and realize everybody's at a different place in their journey.
I love that. I love what you're just saying, because when I'm on my path and I'm not being derailed, I know exactly where Pret-a-Manger is and I know exactly what I can take with me. But unfortunately, we are not angels. And sometimes when we get stressed, even I get stressed, life, becomes a bit hectic, and then you're dashing for that flight and think, I haven't got time. And that's when you're on this kind of victim, I'm a victim of the aeroplane food, or I'm a victim of my minibar, or whatever it is. And when I'm a victim, all that stuff just keeps happening to me, and I go, well, I deserve it. I've had a hard day. Yes, give me a gin and tonic, But when I make a decision, I'm really clear, and I know that all your audiences will relate to this, that they have made decisions in their life where they're unstoppable. And when you're unstoppable, you know that you're on a path with a heart, and you just have to know that you want to do it. And when you know you want to do it, nothing will get in your way, because as you say, you take personal responsibility. You're not being dragged through life. You are on a path. And all these things, it's like you can resist the chocolate, you can resist the alcohol. So that's the physical stuff. But what about the mental stuff? You have to start resisting those negative ideas and go, you know what? This is not me. This is just a lifetime of conditioning. And I'm about to do my spring clean. And wouldn't this be a great process? Start to write down thoughts you would like to have about yourself. What 3 or 4 thoughts could you change from the negative thoughts to the positive ones? And even if you don't believe them, just write them down and start to say them to yourself. And if you say them to yourself 14 days in a row, they begin to create new neural pathways, and you start to create new routines and new expectations, and then you're onto a whole different ball game.
Yes. And so, we talk about those neural pathways, and things happen kind of in threes. Think about it like this, just for a little education. And so 3 days, you get past 3 days, okay, you're starting to develop the habit. The first 72 hours of anything new seem so hard. Then it's 3 weeks. So once you get about to 21 days, you're starting to really get in the groove, and you're like, okay, I can do this. By the time you get to 3 months, you've got it. And so the other piece that is very important about that is realize that when you're forming new pathways, your brain can do only so many things at a time. So take on one new habit. So think about it. If you take on one new habit a month, you have a chance of actually doing it, because you've given yourself at least those 3 weeks plus a little bit to get it really grooved into your brain. So the biggest error I see people making is they try to do everything all at once. That happens at the beginning of the year. I'm not going to eat any food. I'm going to go to the gym. Not only am I going to go to the gym, I'm going to go every single day of the week, and I'm going to work out for an hour. I'm not going to eat anything. I'm going vegan. This is what it is, because you've given your brain too many things, as opposed to, you know what, I'm not going to eat meat for lunch every day. I'm going to have only meat 3 days a week instead of 7, or something like that. So one little change, you keep it, and it keeps going. Now I want to switch gears a little bit. You talk about what films and books people like, what that says about them. And I was like, that's interesting. So the fact that I really love The Matrix, what does that say about me? You don't have to necessarily answer The Matrix, but give us some examples of, you say, what type of books and movies people like says a whole lot about them.
Yeah, this is around finding out what lights you up in life. Because I always say, if you're trying to redesign your life, the best place to begin is to journey inwards, listening to that little voice I said, the voice that comes from within, not the voice that comes from up here, not the rat, but the more spiritual voice that comes from deeper within you. And in order to do that, you've got to identify what are your core values. And I don't mean the values you just picked up from mum and dad. I mean the DNA that makes you Veronica, you know, that very, very special set of values. Now, sometimes you know the core values when people transgress or trample on them. So, you know, I hear people saying, you know, I can abide anything, but disloyalty, that's it, they've crossed the line. And it's like, where did that come from? So I always say, think about some of the films that have moved you, because some films, you know, you can be cathartically sobbing and others leave you cold. Why is that? Well, I have this theory, and I, you know, work with quite a few people, that certain films are pulling at those core values. They're triggering those deeper values. So for instance, take The Shawshank Redemption. That happens to be, you know, a very popular film with a lot of people. Have you seen it?
I've seen it, yes.
Okay, there's that scene where, you know, he barricades and, you know, he's letting all the prisoners hear the classical music. And I love that scene. And what does that say about me? Well, what it says about me is I really want to make a difference. And, you know, my whole role in life is about making a difference. A bit like you, I suppose. You know, I'm sure you really, that's one of your drivers. So that moved me because I thought, oh, fancy putting his life on the line and, you know, having solitary confinement for the next 3 months because he wanted to give them that 5 minutes of having their spirits be released by that music. And when I work with people and they talk about their films, it's incredible how the connection of the film and the core principles that the film is sort of exposing is relating to something they feel really deeply. And it could be a book, it could be a play, but, you know, just think of the ones where you're really sort of moved and think, what does that say about me? Rather than just going, yes, I'm about truth, integrity, honesty, because we're all about those things. But then there's a special brand of value you're about that I'd have to talk to you a bit longer to get to the truth. But just the fact that you're doing this show, you are helping people. So one of your values is contribution. I can just say that right off. So any films that explore that principle of contribution are going to probably sit with you quite well.
Yes. Well, I got to tell you, my other favorite film, which is not so, you know, high and mighty or whatever, is this is a new film, and, you know, people might see this way to Girls Trip. I don't know if you've seen the movie Girls Trip. And so it's 4 African-American women who are friends from college who go on a trip, and they were just cutting up and having a good time in New Orleans. And it's just fabulous. I mean, it was just so, you know, like, oh gosh, I would love to go do that. Everything they're doing in that film, I'd love to go do with my friends.
Exactly. So you value friendship, you value fun, you value humor, you value having a laugh with your girlfriends. And we all know that's a very special thing to have. And that's part of you as well. And values aren't sort of all high and mighty. They're the kinds of things you want to make your life about. So let's say you've set your life up to be too serious and you've gone right out of kilter. That film could trigger something. You go, you know what? When was the last time I spent, you know, a weekend in Vegas or something with my girlfriends or whatever your thing is? And that's that little wake-up call. That's that little voice I'm talking about that says, hello, you're neglecting me, you know?
It's funny that you would say that, because one of the issues that I feel that I have is everything's so serious all the time. And I'm just like, people, because of your profession and what you do, you're always supposed to be a certain way, which is vanilla wafer and boring. Now, I'm not naturally a vanilla wafer and boring something, but whenever I go off of the track that people see me as in that particular way, it's attack, attack, attack. Oh, how dare you? You can't. Are you really a doctor? You can't really be a doctor if you're acting like that or saying that, or, you know. And so it's just like, I think that's what it tapped into, the listen, I'm who I am, and just because I have a degree behind my name, it doesn't mean that I don't have fun and want to do the same things that Joe Sixpack does, in a different way, obviously. So Yes, that's exactly what it tapped into, and a different type of fun. It wasn't, you know, a lot of these kind of films are, you know, men, and particularly white men, going off and doing all these silly things. Whereas to see four educated, not, you know, ghetto, but educated Black women going out, speaking well, they're all professionals, you know, high careers, and then they're just cutting up and having a good time out there where no one knows who they are necessarily, and no one of them's high profile, and so, you know, but they're in a place where they're out, they're having fun, and they're not being judged because nobody knows who they are, they're out of their element. It's just like, it was like freeing to watch that on the film. But the other part of it that was so invigorating about it is being in the movie theater, and the whole movie theater, very diverse crowd of people, being in stitches over this movie, which illustrated to me how excellent the actresses and the actors in the movie were. I mean, the whole movie theater was like, lay it on the floor. So yes, you tapped right into it.
But the other thing I just want to interject to say is you are breaking the mold, because you're not a stereotypical person in a white coat with big dark glasses looking very serious and intimidating. But isn't that brilliant? Because what you're saying is, look, you can do it too, whether you're a woman, whether you're, I don't know, from a different, whatever, you know, it's just you're breaking the mold. I'm sure I break the mold when I walk into some of those all-male groups, you know, in their pinstripe suits in the city, you know, and certainly when I was doing some of the work in my 30s, I was definitely breaking the mold. So, well, isn't that beautiful? I love that, because you're letting people know you too could do this.
Yes, and
you don't have to look a certain way.
And so, you know, I encourage more people to do it like they would do it, as opposed to trying to be or emulate somebody else. And so realize that how everybody does it is going to look different. And it needs to be, because there's so many different people in the world that need help. And so, yes, that's why I do this show, so people can see it done a little bit differently. And I'm going to say whatever I'm going to say. But now, your book, I'm going to let you give the entire title. My show members know that they're going to go and be able to click the link in the show title and everything, give it. But you give your book name, where we can get it, and just a little snippet about the book.
Okay, I actually have a copy handy, so I can hold it up there. It's a lovely little book called Motivate Yourself, Get the Life You Want, Find Purpose and Achieve Fulfillment. And it's a distillation of the work I've done in the field, so it's practical and it literally guides you by the hand. So it's one of those books you can keep by your bed, you know, with your journal, pick it up, do a little bit of, you know, processes with yourself, pop it down. Great to take on holiday with you. Friends have taken it on holiday and said it was brilliant because I reevaluated, you know, my values, what I wanted to do. And it's a bit of a tonic, you know. And at the back, I've got little motivating principles. And one of my motivational principles is, everyone has a choice. Be positive and choose to be happy. That's just one of 10 that I talk about. But choosing to be happy is a big deal. You know, I challenge some of your viewers to go, today I'm going to choose to be happy, and see what happens, because it is a choice. You know, whatever's happening to you, you can make those choices. So it's practical, it's got case studies in it, and it's got little processes, and it's available on your Amazon.com. If you're in the US, and in the UK, you'll probably get it in WH Smith's. So, you know, if you pick it up, I hope it really helps guide you, and have fun with it.
Yes, wonderful, Andro. Just because I know all those people who write books and spend that time are doing it because they want to impact lives. AndroDonovan.com is how we can find you.
Yes.
And so if you're a CEO watching it, Andro Donovan is somebody you want to have in your boardroom. And if you're not a CEO, You may change your life based on reading her book, and then you'll be in talking to CEOs, or you will be a CEO. That's the way I look at it. Because once you motivate yourself, the sky is the limit. So Andro, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. So refreshing. Thank you. And lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Wellness Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more on how to bring wellness into your life, visit drveronica.com. See you all next week. Take care.